I'm honored to be here tonight. Receiving an award such as this is all the more meaningful because I have my partner Barry, my wife Abby, and my son Michael, and some directors of our bank. I have one of my college roommates and long-term best friend, and so a lot of friendly faces and throughout the room. So I'm happy to be here and looking forward to a wonderful evening with all the other honorees, and I congratulate them all. I'd like to thank the FPA, one of the foremost institutions on foreign policy and global affairs. It's exciting to speak at the same forum that hosted presidents, other heads of state, and luminaries I've known from the business sector like John Whitehead and Paul Volcker, who over your last 25 years have also received this prestigious medal. As Barry mentioned, my interest in foreign affairs first took hold through my family's history of business activities throughout the world. Abby and I have also shared the adventure of visiting countries across the globe for both business and pleasure, and maintained associations and close friendships in many countries. Our travels and activities abroad and around the world have enriched our lives immeasurably. Tonight I want to focus on one aspect of my international interests and the involvement, the relationship between the United States and China. This is perhaps the most important relationship in today's world. Our countries are the two pillars for growth in the 21st century, and they may well decide the course of the global economy and global affairs. But will they decide it as partners or as adversaries? If the United States and China cooperate, we can unlock an era of historic progress, harmony, wealth, and opportunity. But if we fall into conflict, the future is much less certain. This is not just my opinion. In an interview last year, Henry Kissinger said, quote, "The peace and prosperity of the world depend on whether China and the United States can find a method to work together." Much as the U.S. and Western Europe together shaped the past 100 years, the U.S. and China will undoubtedly shape most of this century. The Western Alliance shared the values of liberal democracy built upon the foundation of Western civilization as a basis for cooperation. Finding the common ground between America and China is far more challenging. It may help to start with a little Chinese history. China has always had a complex relationship with the rest of the world. Consider the Han Dynasty, which ruled roughly 2,000 years ago. In some ways, it's a precursor to modern China. The dynasty launched aggressive campaigns and steadily expanded its territory. In that vein, today we see the situation in Tibet and the South China Sea. Faced with rising military costs, the Han rulers established strict government monopolies on salt, iron, and alcohol. Modern China has large state-run enterprises that function much as government monopolies. But the Han Dynasty also had numerous international innovations, initiating contact with a number of civilizations for the very first time. The Han built embassies, dispatched ambassadors, and established trade. They built relationships that led to the Silk Road, the engine of global commerce connecting the ancient world. The China of today is again building outward relationships. The Belt and Road Initiative, with its maritime Silk Road component, is building what the Chinese hope will be a Silk Road for this century. Faced with this complex landscape, a key to cooperation rather than conflict is building bilateral relationships, serious, real, and sustainable relationships. As one might expect, it's much easier to set that goal than to implement it. There are, however, three areas where I have personally seen great potential. First, we can cooperate in medical innovation to meet growing health needs. That's why, as Barry mentioned, we started our foundation, the Milstein Medical Asian American Partnership Foundation. We did this to improve bilateral relations with China, which I think is so important. My family has a tradition of private philanthropy in the medical field. Abby and I have continued in that work, expanding our scope beyond New York. For example, we are funding work to find double antigen cures to malaria and tuberculosis, which are still scourges in the developing world. I believe it was made possible not just by philanthropic dollars, but by the human connection I was able to establish with the Chinese Vice Minister of Health. Our mission is to bring together doctors and scientists from across the U.S. and China to advance global public health. And as Barry mentioned, since 2011, we have brought more than 50 doctors from 20 leading Chinese institutions to do research at 20 leading American medical institutions. This has been recognized by China as something that's vital to the future, and so we're pleased to continue it. Our work is one small example of how the U.S. and China can build trust by pursuing medical breakthroughs. Together, it can also serve as a basis for innovation in technology as our two nations help to remake health systems from the 20th century acute care model to 21st century prevention and wellness models. The second opportunity we need to pursue is for greater cultural understanding. Most Americans have only a superficial notion of Chinese history and culture, and the same is true for most Chinese people's knowledge of the West. One of the great keys to understanding China resides in the Ming and Qing dynasty encyclopedias. These are compendiums of all the great works of Chinese literature, history, science, technology, etc. They were compiled in the 15th and 17th centuries, and I've been working with the Chinese National Library in Beijing and with Western institutions such as Cornell University and Cambridge in the UK to enable the translation of these many thousands of volumes, first into modern Chinese and then into English. Personally, I've seen great potential there. We can cooperate in medical the area, in cultural exchanges, and in other fields. But the key factor is person-to-person relationships. There's no substitute for taking the initiative, and I encourage all of you to join me in that worthy endeavor of getting to know people from other countries, understanding them, and celebrating our common humanity together. Thank you.